A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay. It is a rather cool and slightly Welsh evening here in Johannesburg. The rest of South Africa largely bathed with sunshine, enjoying a beautiful day. A day in a country in which we are still unable to buy or sell or move wine, at least legally. And that has been challenged at the moment. One of the big stories in the wine world this week, Vinpro finally having enough and decided to head to the courts to try and offset at least some of the wine ban. It's a subject we've spoken of at length on this particular show, so I won't go into it too much more today, other than to say that a very special selection of guests who we have on the show will all be helping out the broader South African wine story as we look to offset a little of the damage done here at home by continuing to spread the South African wine gospel far and wide around the world. And that's probably why I'm looking a little flustered, partly because I've just got off an exercise bike. I'll explain why in a moment, but also because I have three incredibly high-profile international guests, plus a chili oil salesman from Stellenbosch, who joined me on the show today as we look ahead to a really big international wine conference that promises to bring up some really pressing and important topics in the wine world at the moment, discussing them amongst an incredible array of voices and throughout bringing up the subject of South Africa, South African wine, and the challenges we are facing. It's a terrific conference. It's one I'm very proud to be playing a very small role in, but also to see a number of key South Africans in, one of whom we're speaking to today. And I'm going to introduce our guests in just a second. Before I do that, there's some completely non-wine related news, just some stuff to look out to. Once we're done here, if you are watching this from South Africa or you're a South African abroad and you're a rugby fan, this weekend is the Currie Cup, and I will be straight off this and at 6 o'clock onto the Dan Nicholl Show Instagram live channel as we chat to Jeremy Ward. The Sharks are in the Currie Cup final this weekend, taking on the Bulls. Jeremy joins us on Instagram Live ahead of Saturday's big game. If you're American, it's the equivalent of the Super Bowl, just our commercials aren't quite so cool. And then on Saturday, now this is against my better judgment, I will be jumping onto my skill bike to take part in the Jeff 25-hour fitness challenge. I won't be doing 25 hours myself, just a half hour. Myself and Springbok World Cup winning captain Butch James will be joining John O'Maincheese for 25 hours. We're doing the 30 minutes collectively around South Africa, and pledges from that going to help frontline health workers across South Africa. If you'd like to be part of it, if you'd like to join in, if you'd like to watch me and Butch at 10:30 on Saturday morning or any of our other guests, then look for Jeff Fitness on Facebook and come and join in. So that is Saturday. Possibly by Saturday, we'll be able to buy and sell wine again. I'm not overly hopeful, but I'd love that to be the case. What I will be able to do by Saturday, in fact, I could do it right now, is jump online and go and buy a ticket for Wine Future 2021. It's a conference that brings together authorities on the subject of not just wine, but marketing, business, a whole range of wine-related spaces to discuss the challenges, the opportunities in the industry at the moment, and benefit from the collective knowledge of some extraordinary people in the wine industry and other industries that have related interests. And so we're looking at that today, and I've got four very special guests I'd like to welcome on. One of them was one of Spain's greatest ever tennis players, who now spends his time hanging out with Barack Obama and organizing very cool events. One of them is, I think, the unofficial mayor of the Upper Hudson River area, one of the great wine writers and wine influencers in America. We've also got one of Magic Johnson's best mates, who was a wine tourist in South Africa years ago and turned a chance wine meeting into one of the great African wine businesses. And then a good friend of the Dan Really Likes Wine show, chairman of the Stellenbosch Wine Routes, and the man behind Villa Fonte. So collectively, Pancho Campo, David Fura, Selena Guffe, and Mike Ratcliffe, a warm welcome to you all. Lovely to have you on Dan Really Likes Wine. Thank you for joining us, particularly Selena, David, and Pancho, because you've all got proper jobs. Mike just pours himself glasses of wine and tastes chili oil, so he keeps himself busy. Thank you all for being part of the show today, ahead of what sounds like a really exciting conference. And Pancho, I'd like to kick off with you just to give us some background, because this was your idea. You've done loads of events. You brought them all together. I'm fascinated to know, though, how you made the change from world-famous tennis star to this event organizer whose profile picture on WhatsApp just happens to be you hanging out with your mate Barack.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for supporting Wine Future. How did I make the change from tennis? I realized that I was not going to be a great tennis player. You only make a living if you are amongst the top 50, 80 in the world. So I became a tennis coach. And when I got tired of traveling the tour, I decided to open my own company about 30 years ago. And we started, of course, with tennis events with Andre Agassi, Pat Cash, Stefan Edberg. Then we moved to other sports, soccer, basketball. And one day I decided to open a new division in the company, which was our music division, where we did concerts with Sting, Pink Floyd, and Enrique Iglesias. And for the last 15 years, because of my passion for wine and my interest in the environment, we have focused mostly in organizing conferences, summits, congresses around the world on topics such as the climate crisis, the environment, and its impact in the wine industry. That's how I go from tennis player to event organizer.
It's been a very successful change, Pancho, as evidenced in particular by your climate conference, which I know had a very, very big impact on that space and brought together a lot of extremely influential people. It's now led into Wine Future. What inspired this particular conference, and why, after a gap of a good few years since Hong Kong, you're bringing it back now?
Well, what triggered for me to organize the first edition of Wine Future in 2009 was the economical recession. I mean, the whole world was having a massive impact. And I thought it was a good idea to create this think tank of influential people from around the world to provide solutions, and not only solutions, to provide inspiration to the many companies that were going, down because of the economical recession, people losing their jobs. So I reached out to Robert Parker, who had never been in Spain and in Europe in an official visit, participating in an event of this category. And I managed to convince him. He was a bit reluctant at the beginning. He said, how are you going to get this off the ground when people are struggling for money? And luckily, it was a very successful event. Lots of good feedback, lots of great speakers. And because the outcome was so positive, we decided to do it every 2 years. 2 years later in Hong Kong, the crisis was still going on. The market was moving toward Asia. Everybody thought that China and Hong Kong and Macau were going to be, the next chicken with the golden eggs. And after that, the world came into a more stable situation, and we recuperated the events we were doing about climate change. During the 5 or 6 years of the economical recession, people were not paying attention to the environment. It was impossible to get sponsors for our climate change conference. So we shifted. We went from Wine Future to the climate crisis. That's when we worked with Vice President Gore, with President Obama, until this year, when the circumstances have forced us to revitalize Wine Future.
Which leads into the event we have in 2021, and our host for that will be David Fuhrer. Let's cross to what I would imagine is a very chilly New York, David. Your role is a key one in putting it all together. Give us a little bit of background, though. You can read wine writing from you all over the place. You've written for all manner of people. How did you fall into the wine space? What triggered the passion for you?
Well, my entering the wine world 3 decades ago was a career shift and a much enjoyed one since. My work has had not just me writing about wine, but I've worked in varying sectors in different parts of the world here in my native US, and for many years in Europe as well. From my perch here deep in the Hudson Valley, I can see the Catskill Mountains today. It's a beautiful view. Working with Pancho is really interesting. Going back to 2006 and my time in Europe, Pancho, give me some glory to my partner here, he was the first guy in the wine world, first person in the wine world to understand, to have a vision of what the climate crisis was happening. And in that, he created the first climate change and wine conference in Spain in 2006, which is where we first met. I zipped over there from my London home to cover it for 6 different wine outlets around the world. And that was the first inkling of wine and climate really having an important thing. And this man had this vision that I said, this is great. I've been knowing this for some years. The world needs to catch up. That was the first of a few different climate change and wine conferences. Our relationship grew closer, and he wanted me to come aboard eventually and host the one he did in Spain in Marbella, his home. And I hosted that. And 2 years later, I hosted the Wine Future in Hong Kong and joined that as well as his event organizer and host for the event, as I am here with Wine Future version number 3.
So you have the Rioja event from '09 under your belt. You've got Hong Kong as well. It's been a little bit of a gap, which means you've had plenty of time to organize the best possible wine conference ever, David. What have we got to look forward to? Sketch out, if someone's never heard of Wine Future, what is it about? What is this conference going to give us as somebody interested in the broader wine space?
Well, in addition to some crazy guy we got helping out with the entertainment from South Africa, joining us recently, the foundation of Wine Future 2021 is based on 4 foundational points. Number 1, the pandemic. It's number 1. That's how it is right now. However, it won't be that way forever. And touching upon that is the economic repercussions that have come out of it in varying ways in varying parts of the world. Thirdly, the climate crisis, as always. We've got to come back to that. It's affecting everybody. Can't get away from it. It's on us. And fourthly, something that's always been on us for many, many years, but has come to the fore in different points, in different strengths, in different ways around the world, not just here in my native US, is systemic inequities or societal discrimination, depending on your way you phrase your words. And this has become the 4th and critical point of our 4 foundations for Wine Future 2021. Over the course of 4 days, we have 18 sessions covering the world of wine business in many different forms. We have 4 keynote speakers, maybe 5 or 6 by the time it happens on February 23rd. And for anybody working with wine, or even if you're just an interested but really an amateur who really wants to learn about the wine business on a broad scale, it's the most fascinating opportunity to do so in a very low-cost manner. You don't have to get on a jet. You don't have to book a hotel room. It's right here in front of you.
And we're going to be explaining just a little later how you can be part of this 4-day online conference. The 4th point you mentioned there, David, the discrimination point, that links directly to the space that will be addressed during our conference by Selena. Before we get to what you're going to be talking about, Selena, let's go to the far more important part, though, which is how you discovered it, and I suspect fell in love with South Africa, and also discovered so much about South African wine. As I understand the story, you were really a wine tourist. You happened to be in South Africa. You discovered the wonderful wine that South Africa had, but you also discovered that it was a world that was in a lot of need of addressing issues of imbalance and discrimination.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Dan. I think that for me, the year 2005 was really, in essence, a storytelling of love. At the onset of the year, I got married. I then started a new job, and that job took me to South Africa to really try to find young people who are interested in coming to the United States on visas to promote better cultural understanding of the United States in a post 9/11 world. And literally, after spending 3 weeks in the country, traipsing from Cape Town to Durban, on my last night, as I sat in my Santon hotel, I saw an advertisement for the first annual Soweto Wine Festival. And I thought, Soweto is not a place that I am familiar with, nor did I know that in Gauteng there was a place that produced wine. So it was really more of curiosity of what's going on down there in Soweto that led to start the festival. Little did I know that it completely transformed not only the way that I thought about what I would spend my life doing, but also I learned about such an amazingly robust wine industry that, as a native Californian who grew up during the era of apartheid, which is more exposed to South African wine because of safety, after tasting great wine after great wine and getting a chance to meet these extraordinary listeners, it became clear that there was a huge opportunity for wine to serve as a catalyst of media through which to tell a story that was not necessarily the narrative in American media with regards to health. And so it was a chance to get into the wine festival that I looked at up until that point in my career as a generalist, ranging from investment banking to consumer packaging marketing at Pancho Campo, as this being the reason for need to have enough courage to venture into entrepreneurship and convince this guy who I'd married 4 months ago to be just as idealistic as I was to do the same. Little did I know, a month later, I would find out that I was pregnant with our first of now be 3 children. But it has been, for sure, one of my best ever entering into the South African wine industry.
And it wasn't just, oh, this is nice, it's romantic, I'll take some great photos. It struck a real chord, both I suspect because through your grandfather and your Ghanaian roots, there's a real link to Africa, but also because being a business type, you decide, I'm going to get stuck into this and make it happen properly. And it was because of you in an absurdly short space of time, suddenly we had a black women-driven South African wine brand in 40 different states in America.
Absolutely. And I think it really just underscores that there was interest, there was demand to understand what transformation looks like, but in a much more creative and delicious medium like wine, to be able to affect, honestly, the ability to help transform what people see as unequal, or to address issues of discrimination in a way that can be motivating, encouraging, and rooted in quality. And so for me, it was like taking the best of both worlds, in that as an African-American woman who has seen discrimination in a variety of forms, but also been able to benefit from my ancestors and those who have fought in the civil rights before me, much more progress than the previous generation. I felt like in this moment, it was my calling to leverage all of the experiences that I had had in the business world to be of social good and benefit, while also being able to say, you can have great wine and produce great wine while also having social impact. Hence my decision a year ago to also partner with one of my childhood heroes, Mr. Irvin Magic Johnson, to leverage even all that has been done in my work within the wine industry to take it to the next level and drive outsized impact across a variety of industries and consumer packaged goods.
I think the general consensus, Selena, is that Magic is rather lucky to have you, and I suspect he'd be the first person to attest to that. Let's take those thoughts, take those philosophies, and move them into the space you're going to be addressing directly during the course of the conference. We know here in South Africa, it's not just wine. As a society as a whole, we're still addressing a lot of issues of imbalance. And when we look at America from our perspective here in South Africa, I think we see two things, Selena. We see a country that does seem to be deeply fractured and has a lot of social cohesion that is needed and it is hopefully on the horizon. But there's also a sense of great change in America, and that people who are perhaps on the periphery now have the opportunity to move more towards the center and have more of a say in the lives that they lead. If we bring that down into the wine space, give us an idea of what we can look forward to, the conversation. I think you're with Letitia and with Alicia, what we can expect from you, what we can learn from you during your conversation that's coming up on day one of Wine Future 21.
I'm excited because Letitia and Alicia have extraordinarily diverse experiences within the wine industry. Couple that with my journey, and what you'll hear is from women of color who have completely different experiences, but have committed themselves along the journey to really exposing the world to incredible wine, despite the challenges. And so, as we heard David say, there are for sure societal inequities that at any turn could make or break a harvest, or make or break selling something into a large retailer, or having something available by the class on a wine list. But I think what we represent in this seminar is the fact that at the core, issues around discrimination and inequity are really the plight of the human condition. Psychologically, we can think of many reasons why people either associate and can relate to one another better, or find reasons to be divisive and think of themselves in ways that are either superior or inferior to others. What I love about what people can expect in our seminar is that we will use wine as the medium through which to bring about the balance, and to share both, those triumphs that have occurred as a result of really having had a dynamically diverse and sometimes challenging road to achieve success, with also the benefits of looking at our space in the wine community as differentiated and distinctive, which lets us stand out. So there are always two sides to each coin. And what I'm looking forward to sharing during that session is that there are many different ways to either add value in this industry or to be able to extract opportunities to then benefit however you choose to play in the wine space going forward into the future.
I think the key take out there, and it's a really important one for us here in South Africa, is diversity is an opportunity rather than a threat to the industry. And when that's embraced, you're taking a big step forward. Serena is speaking on day one. She is immediately followed by a very good friend of mine, a very good friend of Dan Really Likes Wine, and a great ambassador of South African wine. To that end, I'm drinking some South African wine. I'm not drinking his wine, though, partly because it's far too expensive for somebody like me, but also because I've got a bottle of Kleine Zalze, and the reason I have some Kleine Zalze is because Karina Host from Kleine Zalze is also speaking at Wine Future, along with Siobhan Thompson from Wines of South Africa. They're joining Mike Ratcliffe, the CEO of Stellenbosch Wine Routes and the man behind Villa Fonte. Mike, just at a very broad level, having a look at this, having a look at the speakers involved, having a look at the diversity, it's a wonderful opportunity for anybody, but particularly for us in South Africa, to get some terrific wine insight from some really great wine minds from around the world.
Yeah, hi Dan, it's great to have all these speakers on your show right now. I can tell you that the list of speakers, and I would encourage everyone watching this to go to the website and really have a look at this list of speakers. You'll never get this kind of diverse, incredible wine talent in one spot at the same time. But to answer your question, I mean, I think living at the southern tip of Africa, especially in the current pandemic times, we risk tunnel vision, where we kind of gather all the information that we have available to us without being able to go very broadly. And I think that the biggest advantage of Wine Future is to be able to hear fresh perspectives from every corner of the globe, to hear how people are dealing with issues, and you know, for the leaders in the South African industry to get some real good context of how they should be leading going forward.
You've been given two unenviable tasks at Wine Future, Mike. One of them is to follow on from Selena. The other is to act as soothsayer for the wine industry and explain to us all how we prepare for things we can't really prepare for. And the pandemic is both the current and the most striking examples of that. Talk to us about your presentation, about the conversation you're having, and broadly what we can maybe do to future-proof our wine businesses.
Well, as you say, the idea of following on from Selena's presentation is tough. So it's going to take a lot of preparation. I will be joined on the panel with Robert Joseph, an old friend of mine, and one or two other very eminent people. We will be speaking about the situational analyses, how leaders should be reacting to different predictable and unpredictable situations which may arise. The pandemic is the most obvious one of those, but within the pandemic, you have issues like prohibition in South Africa, which for many is completely unpredictable, but potentially the current prohibition that we're in at the moment, because it's happened before last year, it may well have been predictable. The demise of on-consumption in the pandemic also has been staggering. Three other major topics that we'll be discussing in some detail is climate change, drought, fire, flood. You know, these are all major things, some of them becoming more predictable than they might have been in the past. We'll be looking at political issues, you know, the massive impact that the American tariffs are currently having on the fine wine industry in Europe, and their exports to America is massive. That little thorny issue of Brexit, you know, once again, it's a massive situational analysis that dramatically changes the playing field. And then finally, we'll be looking at technology, you know, how in the last year, e-commerce has exploded, virtual marketing has become de rigueur, and how the impact of technology is literally changing the face of wine.
It's also an opportunity for yourself, for Siobhan, and for Karina to quietly but forcefully put out the South African wine story. we've spoken many times on the show about the key silver lining to an incredibly difficult last 12 months being the fact that more people around the world are learning about, understanding, trying, discovering, and in many cases really enjoying South African wine. Is this another opportunity for the three of you together to keep pushing that story and to showcase not just the influential people who are part of the conference, but the many, many people around the world watching it, that the South African wine story is a really vibrant one, a really exciting one, and one that's really worth investing time in?
Yeah, most certainly. That's definitely one of the objectives. And, I think injecting the South African narrative into the global conversation is a very important part of that, in the same way that other speakers will bring their perspective, their domestic and local perspective into the global conversation. It's definitely very important. And frankly, despite the fact that I'm a speaker, I'm really looking forward to some very high level learnings. And I'm sure David will tell you some of the people that are participating in the conference. We are going to be hearing from the horse's mouth from a lot of very influential people that quite literally shape the face of the global wine industry.
Well, I want to go back to David on exactly that question and the people involved. And when I ran through the speakers, there was the expected selection, a very impressive selection, David, but expected nonetheless, the winemakers, the wine sellers, people in the wine industry. But you also had some people I certainly wasn't expecting, industries, you look at that, that's not involved in wine, but then they come into wine from a very different perspective, or they offer some learning that could be key to the industry. Give us a couple of examples of some of the high-profile people in the wine industry, but also some of the people from a little left of center, and why you've chosen people like that to be part of this gathering.
Thanks. Well, one issue that's become very critical, especially now that everybody is more or less staying at home to do their business quite often, is anything that having to do with computers. And data research and analytics came out of our already having in place a digital marketing and social media session. Well, out of that, we realized we need to laser down a bit more. And so we created this strategizing with data research and analytics session, which has a few of the very most top people in this speaking on that, on this detailed technical issue. Polly Hammond from New Zealand, Paul Mabray from my native US, Dan Sims from Australia, and a gentleman who is a top academic at the Geisenheim University in Germany, Gerli Somoki. Excuse my Magyar is not perfect, but he'll be leading this pretty esteemed panel. In addition, we have a fantastic wine tourism session, again, with some famous names you're well aware of, Adrian Bridge, who we worked with previously in Porto, and Sylvie Kaz, a famous name from Bordeaux. We also have a session, again, outside the box, called Learning Lessons from Other Industries. And in this, we have a very talented moderator who's worked directing other conferences, high-level wine conferences, Pauline Vicard. But joining her for this will be a gentleman who is a top-level coffee guy, Peter Giuliano, working with the Coffee Science Foundation and the Specialty Coffee Association, who has a worldwide perspective on how the success of coffee can help be looked at and imparted to wine. And as well, we have a gentleman who's going to be showing us new technology that can be used to help promote wine that is being used successfully, some very high-level luxury brands and other types of businesses. In addition, we're talking to people in the cannabis world to see if there's any possible link in terms of legal cannabis production and sales that makes sense to this session as well. So that's a little bit of a sampling of people a little bit outside the box that you might want to come check out to see how all this impacts wine.
If I go back to your previous two conferences, Pancho, and I look at the people who were involved with them, who came and watched, who came and partook, who came and learned from them, who should be coming? Who should be buying the tickets? Who should be logging on and watching this? Who's going to benefit for being part of Wine Future beyond just the guy who owns the wine farm or the guy who's trying to sell some wine?
Well, definitely, this is a trade event, and we have always targeted the event to people working in the in the wine business industry. Based on my past experiences, the people that are working in middle to upper management at the winery level, importer, distributors, retailers. But in this occasion, the word pandemic says it all. Pan means worldwide, demos means population. And that's the same approach that we have inputted in this event. You know, before, people that were into viticulture and enology were not so much interested in Wine Future, but now, you know, those people are also our target because of the climate crisis, sustainability, inequalities. The pandemic has had effect in the vineyards. A lot of laborers have not been able to come to Europe to pick the grapes because of the travel ban. A lot of wineries have suffered because when they took the grapes to the winery, maintaining social distancing was quite a challenge. So it's a purely trade event. And in this occasion, I think everybody that is working in the wine industry should have an interest. The beauty of Wine Future is that you can watch it live, but if because of a time difference or because your working schedule doesn't allow you, you can always watch it on demand. And you can pick and choose. I mean, if you're into wine tourism, there are a few sessions. If you're into viticulture, there's a lot of, you know, sustainability, climate change. We've gone heavy on the virtual world, virtual events, what's going to be the future of wine fairs, how you know, we can reach new consumers. And I think this has been you know, a blessing in disguise of the pandemic. The only benefit that we can get out of this pandemic is that finally the wine industry has gotten heavily into the virtual world, social media and digital marketing. So I hope that answers your question.
It answered it about 90%. I think you might have left out, though, a critical group of people who might be lining up to watch it. And those are film fans with a fondness for a particular director, because you've got a guy involved in the wine industry taking part in this conference, Pancho, who's also made one or two decent movies in his time.
Yeah, indeed. You know, he was one of our keynote speakers in Hong Kong. He came there, you know, that was a 100% live event, person to person. And it's Francis Ford Coppola. I mean, for me, my favorite movie of all time, it's the series of The Godfather. I think he is a legendary name, but also he has different wineries. And nowadays he is more involved in the wine business than in the movie business. So he can speak with, you know, a lot of background, but also help us to create awareness in mainstream media with potential consumers and with people that, you know, like to listen to what celebrities. Why do celebrities get involved in wine? Why there are so many, you know, hands-on in the wine industry? So Francis Ford Coppola is one of our so far confirmed 4 keynote speakers. The other 3. One is from the wine world. It's this Director General from the OIV, the International Organization for the Vine and the Wine, Paul Roca. But the other 2 have nothing to do with wine. Irina Bokova, which is, for me, is a must. Irina is a good friend of mine. She's participated in a couple of my events, and she was the 10th Director General for the UNESCO. And last but not least is Mr. Manuel Butler, is the Executive Director for the World Tourism Organization. And there's a direct link nowadays between wine and tourism. It's a tremendous source of income. It represents more than 80% of the income of wineries in the Napa Valley, but it's also being promoted by scientists. The rural aspect of any industry. People are trying to get out of the cities to avoid being confined. And wine tourism, for me, it's going to be, at the moment, the tourism industry is one of the industries that have been affected the most. They're really having a tough time, but eventually wine tourism and rural tourism will be the way of the future for those years where the pandemic is still, around us. So yeah, I mean, I think it's Francis Ford Coppola is a great name, but not only the one, he's the most famous, but there are a lot of great people there.
Well, I think he's quite famous. He's never played tennis for Spain, but he is quite famous. We'll give him that. It's the diversity of your lineup, Pancho and David, that for me is so exciting, and the breadth of experience that awaits anybody involved in the conference. And Selena, it links to me to something that I don't think we give as much time to as we maybe should. You're going to be talking about diversity in wine. It's a crucial area of wine to look at in many, many places, particularly in South Africa. But also here in South Africa, we're looking at diversity of audience, getting more people to drink wine. It's a really big part of Dan Really Likes Wine. The person who doesn't drink wine at all to try a first bottle, the person who only ever buys the same bottle of wine to try 2 or 3 different ones, be it brand or grape varietal. How important is it to diversify that wine audience, to get people from different areas, from different cultures and different backgrounds into this wine space, get them to fall in love with wine and to grow and develop the industry as a result?
From my perspective, it is critical. It is critical for even populations that are becoming of drinking age to understand what their options are, especially being here in California with a very large booming cannabis industry. There are options. And I think as consumers grow into their ability to exercise their freedoms and how they choose to spend their time having experiences that are really about relaxation, around coming together, around community, being able to talk to those audiences in a way that they feel like there is a deliberate and intentional desire to see them be included, I think will be key, because there are just so many options from which people can partake. And so I think that with this particular conference being so visionary, with us looking at it from such a variety of angles that are really innovative and focused on the future, I would say that being able to have a strategy for how we take all of the experiences that we've seen happen in 2020 that have in some ways put a spotlight on just human inequity provides an opportunity for those really strong marketers who will be listening in, or those operators who are trying to figure out from a palette perspective what makes most sense for them to be focusing their energies on. I think this conference has a wonderful opportunity to be able to expose a variety of stakeholders to insight that can help them really try to focus in and narrow their perspective to those groups that they feel have the greatest opportunity for growth for their respective entities or organizations. Obviously, the wine industry, depending on where you are in the supply chain, can be very difficult margin-wise, or can be margin accretive. And I think that for the success of the industry as a whole, we as wine traders who are focused on, in this case, the South African wine industry, but just generally giving people a sense of what's possible with the beauty and power of wine, I think that there will need to be some really strong quantitative and qualitative analysis around where the opportunity is most outsized to grow. And that growth absolutely comes from a diversity of populations, a diversity of thoughts around how people experience wine, so that it's memorable, so that it has a long-lasting imprint on one's psyche, so that I believe the point that Mike or even Dan, you may have made around the resurgence of wine tourism. We will eventually get through this pandemic. And when we do, what will people be thinking about? How will they want to engage? I believe they're going to want to engage with those wine brands and or with those vineyards that most resonate with what they see as bringing joy, bringing a sense of peace or enjoyment to their lives in the most profound way.
Mike, I think that chimes brilliantly with what I feel is one of the 2 great attributes that we have as a South African wine industry. The first one simply is, as Selena told me several times off air, South Africa has the best wine in the entire world. And I think David and Pancho do agree, even if they won't say so publicly. But the other one is that South Africa has such great wine stories to tell. And Selena has taken one of those stories and taken it over to America. And it's great wine meeting great story makes for great marketing opportunity. There's no finer wine marketer in South Africa than you. It's a wonderful opportunity for us here in South Africa, but really for anybody in the wine industry, if you can back up an incredible product with a really wonderful way, a unique way of telling the story of that wine and selling it to people, you're going to have so much more potential to make a real impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the entire demographics of the wine market are changing, and as we see the millennials coming through, the first millennials turning 40 this year, there is definitely a different conversation that's required. And you describe it as stories, which I couldn't agree more with. It's the absolute way to be positioning ourselves as a country, especially with millennials. But millennials have got a particular story that they're looking for, and it's got to do with the triple bottom line. They're looking for, you know, environmental. They want to make sure that the wines that they're drinking aren't harming the environment. They want to be sustainable. They want the producers to be diverse, and essentially they're looking for stories where the wines that they consume are telling them about the good that they're doing. Millennials also know that they've got a huge amount of choice, and so they will gravitate naturally towards the stories that they like to hear. So yes, I think it's a great opportunity for South Africa to get its story out to the world. Serena is quite right. Tourism will come back. We just need to make sure that when tourism comes back, that we've got a tourism industry that's still standing. And my final comment on that is for anyone out there that is looking at the website on the screen right now and looking at registering. I would absolutely encourage everybody in South Africa to make sure that you get an international perspective. It's too easy to be stuck at the bottom of South Africa and not have, you know, get crowded in by our local opinions. The world is so big, and we really need to take on board what's going on in the world for us to be relevant. So stories are the answer, Dan. Over to you.
And you tell them brilliantly. Very quickly before we let you go, Mike, as we drift to an end, in 30 seconds, what are you most excited about Wine Future 2021?
Well, I'm looking forward to getting a lot of different perspectives. I'm specifically interested in the technology side of things, understanding to what extent technology, I already know that it's doing a lot, but I think that I'm going to learn a lot more about that. Specifically, the interaction between the changing demographics, the millennials, and technology, and how they interact with wine. It is a completely different world out there, and I'm hoping to come out of Wine Future with a greater understanding of what messages we need to be targeting to this new consumer.
Mike, of course, has a slightly unfair advantage. He's married to a millennial, which does make things a little easier. Mike, let's jump over to Selena. Selena, in closing with you, a similar question to you. What are you most excited about Wine Future 2021?
I'm just excited about learning and hearing about other people's journeys and where they're finding success. I really do feel like there's power in communication. There's power in a joint desire to see us all come through this. There are a number of reasons why just being able to still successfully exist as a wine professional in this moment are challenges beyond, you know, I think anyone's imagination 2 to 3 years ago that something like this could happen. And so learning about how people are still rising despite the challenges, I think will be key. I'm excited to learn from those who are thinking about their operating models in agile ways and are much more of the belief that transparency and lateral alignment as opposed to vertical alignment can actually be a recipe for innovating and pivoting in such a way that benefits all. And that theme to me around agility through lateral alignment, meaning we don't just have to work through our company and how we're going about it, but we're talking to, you know, what one might define as a competitor, or we're talking to tangential or adjacent industries to then rise and become stronger. I think that's the way forward. And I'm excited to learn from those who are willing to share as I am.
I think that sense of collaboration is such an important part of our collective wine future. And I know certainly here in South Africa, we're seeing a far greater sense of my next door neighbor. Yes, he's also trying to sell a Cab Sav, or yes, she's also trying to sell a Shiraz. But if we work together, we can do so much more. And that applies to the industry as a whole. And for me, that sits so much at the ethos of what Wine Future 2021 is all about. Just before we wrap up with David and with Pancho, a couple of comments from some of the people watching. Denzel Jonathan Swartz. Some absolutely wonderful topics, says Denzel. There certainly are, and you can see all of those topics across the 4 days on winefutures2021.com. Reginald Peckmeyer out at Cheetah Plains, was a regular viewer. Very rich subject you've outlined, Mike, and looking forward to listening to you, Selena. Grant Saul's great lineup of guests. There certainly is, Grant. One other comment from Denzel Jonathan Swartz. I'm in awe of this conference and the open conversation it welcomes. And again, that sense of sharing about it is so important. And then just a question from Grant, which I will preempt. Grant, is there a way to invest in a winery or wineries similar to the stock exchange? Well, there are a few. And next Monday on the show, we talked to Roland Peens, formerly of Wine Cellar, who's got a new project up and running with the Newton Johnson Vineyards, which offers a really exciting opportunity. David, coming back to you, you've done 2 of these before. This one sits in a very different context. It's online. It's in a different world. There are so many new questions around wine in particular and the world in general to be answered. What for you is going to be most exciting about this? And then in a nutshell, just remind people what they need to do to get involved and what it's going to cost them to be part of it.
Well, very simply, it's been an incredible and delightful challenge to assemble what's now about 80 different speakers from around the world, so many different countries that are great thinkers and accomplished in their field, like the 2 people we've had here today join us. Putting this together is a very complex thing, and for someone who wants to understand not only the challenges we're facing, but the solutions that we're applying to the wine world, it's really incumbent upon them to check us out at the website, Wine Future 2021, which you have thankfully been blasting over this. Thank you. But the cost of this is very affordable, considering it's a 4-day event, about 4 hours, if not more, each day, with keynote speeches and no hotels and no transportation to consider. It's 120 euros. And we invite you to check us out on the page. All this information and more is up there, including our 3 NGOs who are donation recipients from this, one of which is South African. And again, we'll have auction lots available as part of this, so people can bid on the auction lots. Those proceeds will also be going to these NGOs that we're benefiting, very credible ones to boot from different parts of the world. And Dan, thank you very much for this chance.
The opportunity to not just meet 80-odd fabulous speakers and learn from them, but support the SOS Children's Village in Cape Town, amongst the 3 charities that have been supported by what is just a wonderfully innovative gathering of wine minds, wine thinkers, and I think most importantly, wine lovers. Speaking of wine lovers, let's get the final word from Pancho, who put this all together at the start. Pancho, Wine Future 2021 is finished. You've had a week to recover. You've opened a beautiful bottle of vintage Rioja, and we're sitting chatting on a video call. What would you like to be able to say to me a week after Wine Future 2021 in terms of what you've delivered? What would you like to say, Dan, this is what I set out to do, and you know what? I made it happen. We seem to have lost, Pancho, we seem to have lost your volume there. I'm not sure if you can hear us. I know your mic is on. We can just try your volume again and just see if we can get you to come in there again, Pancho. No, we seem to have just lost you. Unfortunately, with the volume. I tell you, Pancho, if we can just get you to refresh your feed for a moment, and while we do that, just very quickly, I'll get one last line from Selena and Mike. Selena, very quickly, just remind us of your wine brands, and I know we have a number of people who watch the show in America, or what they should be looking out for in terms of the Selena wine empire.
Thanks, Dan. So visiting heritagelinkbrands.com, you will find a selection of wines from South Africa, including the Seven Sisters, which is based out of Stellenbosch. And in addition to that, you will find that we are into esoteric, usually unexpected wine regions like Brazil. So Casa Valdugas, 130, Donguerinos, Cabernet Sauvignon are just a few to look for.
There we go. I have to say, actually, those are definitely some of my favorite Brazilian wines, and always have been. Mike Ratcliffe, just as we wait to hopefully get Pancho back on there, a last word for me. A really difficult time at the moment, I know. We spoke about the VinPro Court Challenge. Are you optimistic that we're about to turn a corner with South African wine?
Yeah, Dan, I am optimistic. I'm optimistic that we'll first have to get the pandemic under control before we can really get the wine industry under control, but that goes for any industry. I do think that we will be able to get it under control, and I'm actually looking forward to the second half of the year when the world will be celebrating, drinking lots of wine. My personal prognosis, and I've shared this with a number of people, is that 2021 has actually got potential on average to be an excellent year for the wine industry.
And if you talk to any of our wine makers, our wine farmers, they'll tell you it's been a terrific harvest. I think we have Pancho back, so let's head back and I'll fire off the same question again, Pancho. That a vintage Rioja is open, you're kicking back and you're on the phone to me. What are you telling me was the big success in terms of what you'd hoped to deliver and what you have delivered on Wine Future 2021?
Thank you, Dan. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear. Well, I was trying to reply with the same answer that President Obama gave to me backstage in Portugal. I asked him, your slogan was, yes, we can. What would you say now? He said, well, yes, we did. So if I can answer to you the same thing, yes, we did. We inspired people. We brought knowledge. We succeeded as event organizers because at the end of the day, that is my expertise. But before we go, I feel for my South African friends. You guys are probably the industry that is going through the worst of times with that ban on alcohol. How can you go through this pandemic without drinking wine? My God, I can't understand it. So this is what I'm going to do, Dan, for you. I'm going to offer a special discount code of almost 50% to all your listeners that send you an email. As soon as they send you an email, you will be, courtesy of Dan and Wine Future, you can offer to all your listeners today, instead of paying 125 euros, they will be paying only 65. And that's my way as the owner and founder of Wine Future. And I think that David will concur with me as my co-organizer, that that's the best way that we can support the wine industry of South Africa. Thank you so much for your support as well.
Pancho, that is incredibly generous of you, and thank you. We'll send out all the details on our various channels, but if you're watching at the moment, either live or recorded, a very generous offer. The usual fee dropped to just 65 euros from 125 for 4 days of over 80 of the greatest wine minds on the planet. It's an incredibly generous offer. And Pancho, thank you very much. Thank you too for being part of today, along with David, Selena, and Mike. Just 4 of the people involved in this extraordinary conference. At the moment, we feel very vulnerable, I think, as a South African wine industry, but we're made of stern stuff, and we know that with the support of friends like you around the world, or with people in that industry like Mike, that will come through this and will be better and stronger for it. It is the 23rd to the 26th of February. It is Wine Future 2021. It's going to look at the industry from every possible angle and bring you some wonderful speakers, people like Pancho, like David, like Selena, like Mike, and like so many more. To all 4 of you, thank you. If not before, I look forward to seeing you at the end of February for Wine Future 2021. David, Pancho, good luck with the last of the preparation. I know there's a lot to be done. There's going to be a very special gathering. I look forward to being part of it, and I know the Dan Really Likes Wine community does as well. Selena, keep selling South African wine. Mike, keep making great South African wine. And David and Pancho, I know you're going to bring us a great, great conference. Thank you for all you've done already, and thank you for your support of South African wine. It is greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Bye.
So there we go. Pancho Campo, the man who founded Wine Future. David Fury will be hosting and organising the event with him. Selena Guffe, she's almost South African, really. Let's just make her one. Doing such a terrific job of taking South African wine to America, and now has as her assistant at work a guy called Magic Johnson, and Mike Ratcliffe, one of the icons of the South African wine industry. Together, all part of winefuture2021.com. And if you are watching Dan Really Likes Wine, you'll have the chance to pay not 125 euros, but 65 euros to be part of that. Details to follow in the next day or two. So that wraps us up for Dan Really Likes Wine for today. Remember, although we can't buy wine at the moment, we can be members of the Pick and Pay Wine Club. It's absolutely free of charge, and it gets you a terrific array of benefits. You get for yourself 3 times the Smart Shopper points, a 20, you read that right, a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, as well as 25% off a selected case or a Magnum, as well as some great events and access to some terrific competition. Send that Smart Shopper number to 36775 if you're here in South Africa, and voila, free of charge, you are part of it. So what's coming up next week? We're chatting to Roland Peens, formerly of Wine Cellar. He's now got, is it daft? Is it genius? Well, we'll talk to him about it on Monday. An opportunity to buy in to the Newton Johnson wine brand. Make your own wine, get dividends from the wine. It's a kind of wine investing. Grant Sauls, I know you asked that question earlier, something to be part of. And as always, drinking and celebrating South African wine, and hopefully moving a little closer to the end of that dastardly prohibition. A huge thank you to Pancho, to David, to Selena, and to Mike for joining us on Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. If you are a rugby fan, join me in about 2 minutes' time on the Dan Nichols Show Instagram page. We talked to Jeremy Ward about the upcoming Curry Cup semi-final, and on Saturday I'll be doing some exercise for a good cause as we celebrate with John O'Mainchees, myself, and former Springbok World Cup winning fly half Butch James doing 30 minutes of the 25 hours in support of our frontline health workers. I've been drinking Kleiner Zolzer Unwooded Chardonnay. It's drinking delightfully. Karina from Kleiner Zolzer, along with Siobhan Thompson and Mike Ratcliffe, 3 of the South Africans at Wine Future. It's going to be a great event. We look forward to seeing you there, and we look forward to seeing you back on Dan Really Likes Wine again next week. Cheers.